Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kaylee and these are my books. So today I'm doing the mid-year freakout tag. This is a really popular tag on BookTube that lets people talk about what books they're loving so far this year, what books they're disappointed in so far this year, and what books they're anticipating for the second half of the year. So far this year, I've read 140 books. This is my best year of reading in terms of quantity of books I have been reading. Part of that is just due to the fact that I've discovered Kindle Unlimited and I fly through the romances on Kindle Unlimited. I've really been enjoying the books that I've read this year, and that brings me to the first question in this tag, which is what is my favorite book so far in this year of reading? And I'm cheating because I'm showing two books. I couldn't decide. First book being The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, and this other book being Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. So you'll notice these are books that I've read this year, not necessarily books that were released in 2022. Both of these books were just fantastic. The Poppy War is a fantasy adult novel, and Project Hail Mary is a sci-fi adult novel. Both amazing. Project Hail Mary gave me all the feels, and Poppy War is so brutal in such a good way. Very different books, but I highly recommend both of them. The next question is our favorite sequel that we've read so far this year, and I don't own the sequel, but I have here the first book. My favorite sequel is House of Sky and Breath. This is the first book in the series. House of Sky and Breath is the second book in the series. I love Sarah J. Maas. Her books are so fun to read, and Crescent City was one of my favorite books, if not my favorite book from her, before I read House of Sky and Breath. And then when I read House of Sky and Breath, and I read that ending, oh my god. If you know what I'm talking about, you know how crazy that ending was. I even called my mom after I read this book and just described to her the ending because I had to talk about it to someone. I texted my friend about the ending because I just had to talk about it with someone. Both of these people had no idea what I was talking about, but it was just amazing. That sequel was the best sequel I've read in a while. The next question in the tag is what new releases are you excited to read but have not yet read? And I have two books for that answer. I have The Appeal and Upgrade. So Upgrade is Blake Crouch's newest book. His other books that I've read are Dark Matter and Recursion. He does sci-fi thrillers that will make your mind just work in so many different ways. His books are really clever. And I feel like there's no other author out there doing what Blake Crouch is doing with his sci-fi thrillers. Highly recommend. And so, of course, I'm incredibly excited to read his newest one, and I hope it's just as good as Dark Matter and Recursion is. And then the reason why I'm so excited to read The Appeal, even though I don't know much about this author, is this book is a thriller mystery told in legal documents. So the angle that I'm at is a bit hard to show you, but you can kind of see inside the book, it's not told in typical prose. There's letters, there's text messages inside, and it's supposed to be like we're being presented evidence at a hearing. Like, here's a fun page. And we're trying to figure out what's going on in this case as we look through the evidence presented. I've never read a thriller book told like this. I think the closest book would be House of Leaves, which is a horror book told in a untraditional prose format. I hated House of Leaves, but I've also read the Illuminae series, a YA sci-fi series that's told in, again, this sort of untraditional prose format, and I loved those three books. So hopefully this is along the lines of Illuminae and not House of Leaves in terms of my preference. But either way, I'm excited to give this a go just because it will be a new bookish experience for me. The next question is, what is your most anticipated release for the second half of 2022? And again, I have three books for this answer. I'm terrible at narrowing down the answers to just one book, so I'm sorry, but my three books are the Taylor Jenkins Reid new book, Carrie Soto is Killing It, Babel by R.F. Kuang, and the new Grady Hendrix book. I'm not sure if the new Grady Hendrix book will be coming out this year. It seems like it keeps getting delayed, but fingers crossed it gets released in 2022. That book is called How to Sell a Haunted House, and it's Grady Hendrix's take on a haunted house story. Grady Hendrix is my favorite horror novel, and haunted house books are my favorite type of horror novel. So that book is probably my number one most anticipated. I just don't know if it's for sure coming out in 2022, so I didn't want to have it be my only answer. but the Carrie Soto is Killing It is a Taylor Jenkins Reid book. Her books are always outside of my comfort zone in terms of genre. However, I always end up loving her books. I think I've given all of her books that I've read, and I've read Evelyn Hugo, Daisy Jones, and Malibu Rising. All of them got 5 stars for me. So I'm excited for Carrie Soto is Killing It. It doesn't sound that good to me, but none of her books sound that good to me, and then I read them and they're amazing. So either way, I'm excited. And Babel by R.F. Kuang is the same author that did The Poppy War, and of course I read The Poppy War this year. I've also read the sequel to The Poppy War, but have not yet finished the trilogy. And so I think I'm an R.F. Kuang stan, and I'm excited to see her new series. The next question is, what is your biggest disappointment so far in books that you've read in 2022? And biggest disappointment is interesting for me because for me to have been disappointed by a book, that means it has to have been a book I was really excited about reading. So the books I'm going to share are not necessarily my least favorite books that I've read, just the most disappointing books I've read. So the first book is Artemis by Andy Weir. You see Andy Weir's is in the most disappointing books and the best books I've read with his Project Hail Mary. And the fact that Project Hail Mary, I read that book before this book, means that me not liking this book that much made Artemis just the biggest disappointment ever, because I've also read The Martian by him and loved it. So I thought I would just love all of his books, but this book is just kind of dull. I didn't like the characters in it. The story wasn't that compelling to me. It took a while for the plot to really get going for me to see what the point of the book was. And by then, I wasn't invested enough in anything that was going on for me to care. I did finish the book, but I was skimming. By the last 100 pages, I think were just fully me skimming. I think I ended up giving this book 2 stars. And the other biggest disappointment book I have is Jade City. Now, I don't think this is a bad book. I gave this book 3 stars. I just thought this series would be one of my new all-time favorite books ever. And so many people talk about how much they love these books. And I usually love what other people love. So if a bunch of people are talking about loving a book, that usually means I will also love that book. But that did not hold true for this. This was 3 stars. It was fine. I didn't hate it, didn't love it. It was just, the stakes weren't high enough. The main part of this book, the main plot of this book, is a turf war going on between 2 rival gangs in the city. And I just didn't really care about that turf war. I kept wanting the story to go bigger. And I think it goes bigger in future books. I just don't know if I'm invested enough to continue on in future books, because this book was just meh. It felt a little bit like a chore to read, a little bit. It still got 3 stars for me because I was liking the characters and I was liking the bigger world. But anytime we were focused down on just where these characters were and the town that all the fighting was happening, I didn't care. And that was 99% of the book. My biggest surprise so far this year is Ice Planet Barbarians. I got this book as a joke. I thought I would read it and it would be really funny, but it wouldn't do anything for me. I loved this. This was such a fun book. And this is actually the book that started my dive into Kindle Unlimited romances. And now, I know all the subgenres. I know the biker romances, the mafia romances, the monster romances. I'm here for it all. And this is the book that started that. So this was just surprising that I actually really enjoyed it. Unironically, I enjoyed it. So if you have been seeing this book around and are curious at all, I say give it a go. It was really fun to read. My favorite new author for me this year is definitely Darcy Coates. So here I have a couple of books I've read from her, and I loved both of these books. And I hadn't read any Darcy Coates before 2022. But this year, with the start of my Kindle Unlimited era that this started, Darcy Coates books are on Kindle Unlimited. I found these books at Half Price Books, so I have some physical copies. But majority of Darcy Coates books I read on Kindle Unlimited. It's because they're all available on there. And they are so fun. Darcy Coates, for the most part, falls into cozy horror. I think her haunting books, the ones that I've read of the haunting books, are much cozier than the ones that she does outside of the haunting genre, such as Hunted, or she has a sci-fi horror called Parasite as well. Those are less cozy to me, more traditional horror, where the haunting books, they're small towns, we get some lovable characters, there's scary stuff that's happening, don't get me wrong, it leans hard into the gore sometimes, but there's also a lot of lightness in these books. And I love Darcy Coates. I'm excited that she has such a big backlog for me to dive into. Next is my favorite fictional crush in the books that I've read so far. And my two favorite romances so far have been The Charm Offensive and Spoiler Alert. So I was thinking about which characters I would pull out as my favorite fictional crush for this question. And then the back of my mind was reminding me of this one character that I found so irresistible. And it kept saying, hey Kaylee, don't choose Spoiler Alert. Don't choose Charm Offensive. You've gotta go with the Hades. So we're going with the Hades for this question. Hades from Neon Gods is my fictional crush, and I am not ashamed to admit it. My favorite character from books I've read so far in 2022 is definitely gonna be Harry Dresden from the Jim Butcher series, The Harry Dresden Files. This is a series about a wizard detective, Harry Dresden, and he's just a really compelling character for me. I know he has a lot of issues, especially in the earlier books. I'm now on book 6, I think, and the male gaze issues are more present in the earlier books, but still remain an issue throughout all of the books. However, it doesn't bother me enough to dislike the books. I really like the books. I really like Harry Dresden's character. I'm really interested in this world and seeing Harry Dresden navigate this world, but really the draw to me for these books is the character of Harry Dresden, and therefore he has to be my favorite character. Next question is, what book has made you cry in 2022? And I have 2 books, both from the same author, the Ruta Sepetys books of Between Shades of Grey and I Must Betray You. Wow. Ruta Sepetys always gets me. Every single book she's gotten me, I'm ugly crying in every single book I've read from her. And I don't even like historical fiction, but for some reason I keep picking up Ruta Sepetys books and I keep emotionally connecting with her books, and she keeps destroying me with her books. Ruta Sepetys is really the only historical fiction author I read, and I'm not really sure why I like her books so much more than other historical fiction authors' books, but I do. I highly recommend her books, therefore, even if you don't like historical fiction. Her books are very, very emotional, so that was an easy pick for me of what books have made me cry. Just pull any Ruta Sepetys book, but these are the ones I happened to read in 2022. Now, a book that made me happy in 2022 is Under the Whispering Door by T.J. Klune. I was really afraid to read this book because I loved The House in the Cerulean Sea. It was one of my favorite books that I read in 2021, but I was hearing some mixed reviews about this book, that it wasn't as good as The House in the Cerulean Sea. Well, I'm here to tell you that in my opinion, it was as good. I loved this book just as much as The House in the Cerulean Sea. It made me feel so happy. It was like a warm hug, just like The House in the Cerulean Sea. The character development was so satisfying to watch this character go from grumpy and just a complete asshole into a very lovable character that I cared about. I was so skeptical at the beginning of this book because I hated the main character. I was like, there's no way T.J. Klune is going to sell me on this dude. This dude does not deserve a happy life. I hate him. Well, by the end, I was crying for him. So T.J. Klune is the wizard at making me care about characters I wouldn't normally care about. The next question is the prettiest book you got in 2022. And Under the Whispering Door is a runner-up because it has these very pretty edges. If you take off the dust jacket, the naked hardcover has the tea shop on it. Very pretty book. However, I think I'm ultimately going to go with Empire of the Vampire as the prettiest book I own. This is the Illumicrate edition. So the cover is very cool. Look at those edges. So cool. And then taking off the dust jacket, you can see that the hardcover has really fancy gold foiling on it as well. And the spooky end pages, beautiful. Now, the last question is, what books do I need to read before the end of 2022? And my answer for this is kind of a general. I want to read more chunky adult fantasy books. I've been buying a lot of those recently because those are the books that have me the most excited, but I need to buckle down and actually read them. It's pretty intimidating to read these super long books, right? I think I'm going to love them because anytime I pick up one of these hyped adult fantasy books, they become one of my favorite books of all time. It's just a lot to sit down and pick a 700-page adult fantasy instead of, a 250-page adult thriller that I know I can get done in 2 hours. I think the top of my list for adult chunky fantasy that I want to read for sure before the end of 2022 is John Gwynn's Malice. In fact, I'm hoping to read this book even this month. And then also The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. both quite large, but I think I'm gonna love both of them. That is it. That is the whole mid-year freakout tag. If you haven't completed this tag yet, let me know your answers to these questions in the comments. And if you have completed this tag, let me know so I can go find your video or your blog post or wherever you posted it. I love watching videos of people completing this tag, so I hope you liked this video too. If you did like this video, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.